Welcome back, everyone. I'm pleased to call upon our next sponsor, Peak Renewables, to introduce our final keynote speaker this morning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the keynote presentation for today. I'm thankful to be speaking to you today from the traditional territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples. My name is Brian Barta, and I am the CEO of Peak Renewables. We are a biomass pellet producer partnering with the Fort Nelson First Nation to stimulate the local economy by creating jobs, revamping rail infrastructure, and re-engaging the forest industry in the Fort Nelson area. We are proud to be equity partners with the Fort Nelson First Nation, and I'm honored to be given the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker, Chief Sharleen Gale. Chief Gale has been a strong and visionary leader for not only the Fort Nelson First Nation, but also for the community as a whole. Sharleen is the chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, and she advocates for First Nations to have equity stakes in infrastructure projects so they can participate in the economy of their territories. She also believes in a balanced approach of economic prosperity and environmental stewardship. Chief Gale works tirelessly to uphold her people's rights to their land and ensure future generations can live their lives in a way that honors their ancestors. These values and strong vision are the foundation of our business partnership, and I suspect your motivation for wanting to hear Chief Gale speak today. Please join me in welcoming Chief Sharleen Gale of the Fort Nelson First Nation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the Treaty 8 territory within the traditional lands of the Fort Nelson First Nation. It's a privilege for me to be asked to provide the keynote at this forum, especially this year, when there's a particular need to reflect on the natural resource industry and where we are going, and how we can do things differently, because 2020 was difficult, and I'm thinking in particular over the dispute over the Coastal GasLink pipeline and the impacts of COVID-19, but also the ongoing political discord between the left and right in our country and beyond, which is often framed as a conflict between environment and the economy. In some ways, it should be easier to set foot on a better path in 2021 because it would be harder to find worse. But I'm an optimist at heart. I think to be a political leader or a business leader or to get anything done anywhere, you have to be. And I think most of us attending this forum are optimists, and we are doers, and that we want nothing more than anything is to find solutions to the problems that are in front of us. And so I'm hoping to offer you today some ideas that I think can be solutions towards getting resource projects approved and completed in our province in a more efficiently manner and with better outcomes. And by better, I mean more predictable timelines with the full inclusion of Indigenous peoples as partners and in an environmentally responsible way. Sounds good, right? So let me begin. Today I'm here with two hats. The first is as the chief of the Fort Nelson First Nation. Fort Nelson is a Dene Cree community in the Treaty 8 territory in northeastern BC. We're a small nation, but we have big plans. And one of them is the development of the Clark Lake Geothermal plant. If you haven't heard of it, this is a $100 million project to build a 7 megawatt net geothermal electricity generation plant adjacent to our reserve that will supply clean, renewable, baseload electricity to the BC grid. The project will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions by helping to displace the use of electricity currently being used by our region's gas-powered generating plant. It's one of the first commercially viable geothermal facilities in Canada, the first of what I believe will be many, and we anticipate it to go online in 2024. Our other big project is a Biomass Adventure with a bioenergy company, Peak Renewables. It involves a 600-ton per year wood pellet plant in Fort Nelson, with the pellets being derived from the forest residue. So we are working really hard to create opportunities for our people while using our natural assets to produce clean energy. The other hat I'm wearing today is the chair of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition. We are a national organization representing over 70 First Nations. Although our membership is concentrated in BC, we have been expanding, and our members range into the territories and every province east through to Ontario. Our main goal is to enhance the economic well-being of our members by providing services and tools designed to support informed business decisions in major resource and infrastructure projects. Equity ownership of major projects is the key priority for our members of the coalition, and all our projects have this opportunity attached to them. Currently, we are supporting our members in 4 major projects representing a total combined capital cost of $7 billion. So we have big ambitions, and we think equity ownership is a real key to creating a brighter future for our people. When I think about it, these hats are my formal roles, my main roles, but I have several perspectives on top of that. I have a First Nation perspective, which is probably what you see when you look at me. To me, that means that the way we use the land and the way that we share benefits of our land is critically important. My people look 7 generations down the line. Setting a good foundation for prosperity and well-being for our children and our children's children is a priority. And making sure they can practice their culture and enjoy a strong connection to the land is of tremendous importance to us. And of course, I'm a chief, so I have a government perspective. I know how difficult it is to find that line in balancing the interests of different constituencies. I think maybe even better than any provincial representative in this forum, what it's like to have to make hard decisions. Because the resources you have, the budgets you draw up, doesn't begin to address the needs of your people. And I understand the pressure to protect the environment for our future generations, while creating jobs and building opportunities for current ones. But I want you to know, to my mind, I'm here representing the industry perspective too. For the last 20 years, I've worked in the oil and gas sector. I've worked in the gas plant. My home territory encompasses the Horn River and Liard Basin natural gas plays. And now with the Clark Lake and Peak Renewable Project, I've been gaining expertise about geothermal energy and biomass. And I've had to go out and get project approvals and secure financing. So you can be sure that I understand the challenges of resource development on a business side and the impacts and benefits too. And I want you to know this about me so you can understand where I'm coming from and hopefully trust me from where I'm coming from with the solutions I promised I would share. I am looking for a win-win solution. I am tired of the division and the conflict. I think we can do better than that. And right now, we need to do better because we're in a recession and people are out of work and they are hurting. And one thing I can tell you as a chief of the Fort Nelson First Nation is that poverty and unemployment impose many, many terrible costs. It's not just the hunger or material need. Poverty strips you of your dignity and your self-worth. It leads you to a depression and addiction. I can assure you, you don't want that for the people of rural BC. And that's the basic premises behind the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, that we can improve the economic well-being of our people and of everyone through collaboration, that there is a way to gain Indigenous support and participation in resource development. It doesn't always have to be a zero game with winners and losers. It doesn't have to be unfriendly and a place of dispute. There is a future if we're all willing to create it, where First Nations are partners, investors, and owners in BC natural resource industry. And in that future, I believe regulatory approvals will be smoother, project development costs will be lower, investment risk will be reduced, environmental impacts will be lessened, and more Indigenous workers, business owners, and communities will benefit and contribute to the industry. So how do we get to this future? Most Indigenous people I know, and of course there are different views, and I only speak for myself, but most of us are in favor of resource development when our communities benefit and it's done responsibly. But we need to be empowered to become full partners in the development that takes place in our territories. And for that to happen, for me, that means 2 things. Number 1 is having the time and the capacity and resources to conduct our own due diligence on projects, so that we can fully understand the risks and the benefits and share information with our members and our neighbors in our territory. That capacity will allow us to feel confident in our ability to provide solid recommendations, and if a project is a good one, to obtain our members' informed consent. The more resources we have, the more efficiently and thoroughly we can conduct our own assessments of projects and avoid unrest or legal action or delay. Number 2 is having the access to competitive capital so we can maximize the financial returns of our participation in projects. Access to capital is such a challenge to our economic development. There have been many cases when the First Nation major project member nations couldn't secure competitive costs of capital in major projects, and they were forced to forfeit their equity and interests. And that led to a lost opportunity for those communities and a more difficult road for the project itself. So we need to find innovative ways that help address the lack of Indigenous at-risk capital and the overall way capital markets view Indigenous participation. Building capacity takes time, and it takes work. As First Nations, I know we need to commit to doing that work in order to engage as meaningful partners on projects. And I promise you, my council and I in Fort Nelson have been doing the work. My colleagues at the First Nation Major Projects Coalition have been doing the work. This has been a learning curve for sure. But we are putting the time in, and we will continue to do so because we're doing this for our kids. I want to acknowledge that corporate Canada has come a long way in the past 2 decades. There is more of an acceptance and willingness to work with First Nations. And this is not just check a box. And it's not just out of regulatory duty to consult. And I applaud those of you at this forum who have worked to build relationships and opportunities and partnerships with our people. But industry has some more work to do. And I think there's still a tendency for proponents to take a pre-planned deal and then just bring it to the community for approval. And if the community is not willing to rubber stamp that deal, there is frustration and expense and delay, and we are accused of a blocking development. And I'm asking you today to try to evolve that culture to one where you see First Nation as partners, not obstacles to be overcome, and you pick up the phone early on in the process and talk with us about it and co-develop that project with us. I know a lot of communities might struggle in their capacity to engage back, or you might not know who to call. And so today I'm offering that you can reach out to the coalition if you need to, and our organization will try to coordinate and facilitate those discussions and help you build a foundation for a mutually beneficial relationship. And the province has made a real effort at reconciliation, most notably by passing DRIPA, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And just over a year ago, and I appreciate the symbolic effort and everything that went into passing that law, but I am sure they would acknowledge that's just the first step. There is a lot of more work to do in this province. The DRIPA action plan must make the real principles that they committed to on paper come alive. The Declaration recognizes Indigenous people's right to economic development. For me, in order to exercise those rights, we need the province to support Indigenous groups with access to capital, such as competitive rates and loan guarantees, and to access to the independent professional advice and counsel necessary for us to undertake our due diligence on projects. We need to do this so we can provide you the consent that you require of us. So we all have work to do. But I mentioned before, I'm optimistic. I believe this can be done because we are already on our way. We are not starting from zero. First Nations, industry, and the provincial government have all been moving in this direction for some time now. And I firmly believe that with the leadership of organizations like the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, we can make sure First Nations are positioned to be true partners in responsible resource development in BC. If you think this sounds like a path you want to join us on, and I hope it is, then I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to our own virtual conference. It will be our 4th annual industry engagement event on March 18th and 19th, which will be co-hosted by our colleagues JP Glado and Mark Podolowski, 2 influential and visionary Indigenous business leaders. If it's not clear before, it's definitely clear today that we are all better off working together rather than against one another. And I think maybe the pandemic has brought that point home. Like the public health measures, we are all practicing from distancing to washing our hands to wearing masks. We only make progress when we all do our part. And there are consequences when we don't. So I'm asking us all to work a little bit harder, to do a little bit more, to get to the point where BC's natural resource sector can be competitive and prosperous and inclusion for all of us. I'm willing to do my part, and I wanted to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer a few questions today. Masicho, hi. Thank you.
Thanks so much for providing your keynote. Let's just dive into it because I know you've got a busy morning, and we've got some eager audience looking to connect with you more. So the first question that I see is what advice can you offer companies interested in working in your territory, and specifically smaller companies? And I might broaden that out to say also, because with your role as the chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, overall, if you want to expand that beyond your territory, or if you have any comments to provide on that question.
Okay, so can you just repeat the question? I was just having a little troubles there with the sound in the background.
No problem. Yes. So the question is, what advice can you offer companies interested in working in your territory, and specifically small companies, and maybe those companies that don't have the resources that larger corporations might have?
Okay, so I think early engagement is really important when there may be an announcement put on by a First Nation about a project that they're pursuing with a proponent. It's always good to create those relationships on a positive note and just let us know what you can offer. The Fort Nelson First Nation is always open to different businesses and service providers that can help us be successful in the major projects that we're currently engaged in. And just on the proponent front, when a proponent is coming into a community of a First Nation, it's always important to have that early engagement to reach alignment of the interests of all parties to avoid challenges in the project in the later stages.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So moving along, the next question we've got is through the pandemic, everyone's connecting virtually, and we're having our challenges across the province. Just getting everyone together for the forum has been a challenge of itself. But how are you? Can you tell us more about your community? How you're getting your community members to provide input and comments to you on resource projects throughout the pandemic? Are you meeting virtually? Are you using Zoom? And how is that working, connecting through engagement and with your community?
Well, we all know how challenging it has been with the pandemic. We're almost going on a year now. So luckily, we were able to meet with our community up into almost Christmas time. And we've seen the numbers of COVID really reduce during that time. Unfortunately, with the second wave, we're seeing something a little bit different. So going forward, we are planning a lot of community meetings through Zoom. And we have a Facebook Live venue where we tune into our presentations live. So community members, wherever they may be, within our territory or somewhere else in the world, can zoom in and engage. Also, one of the things that we also do, which is really important, is have very detailed information to our members through our newsletter. And we also do an email out to our community members so that we're engaging and talking about the programs and services that we're still offering. I know that It has been challenging for a lot of First Nations, but I am pleased to say that I am on the Premier's Economic Task Force, and I have been invited to Minister Callan, the Minister of Jobs of Economic Recovery and Innovation table to discuss issues that First Nations are having. And I enjoy being able to participate in that because I can really address what the concerns are from our membership from the coalition and also provide solutions.
That's great. That sounds like a lot of different ways that you're reaching out to community, which makes it that much more accessible on an individual basis. These next two questions I see, I'm gonna wrap them together. And so one of them is, what are the primary barriers to Indigenous communities getting access to financing for equity? Also added, great speech, compliment to you. And then secondly, the second part is, where do you see that equity ownership coming from? Is it from the companies, the proponent, the government, own source revenue? Yes, can you, equity is the big question a lot of people want to have answered. And so do you have any insights on that?
Yes, for me, in order for First Nations to exercise those rights, we need the provinces within Canada to support Indigenous groups such as ourselves, the First Nation Major Projects Coalition. We need opportunities from provincial and federal governments to have access to capital at competitive rates and loan guarantees. That has been the biggest challenge for many First Nations for decades. And the access to independent professional advice and counsel necessary for us to undertake the due diligence on these projects.
Thank you very much. This next question is how do you define residue? And when I looked for some clarification, I think you mentioned in your talk that the feedstock for the plant will come from forest residue. And the question I think is a pretty straightforward one, is how you're defining residue within the forest.
Okay, so of course, I wear many hats and I'm not a technical advisor, but one thing that I would welcome you to do is go into the exhibit and reach out to Peak Renewables. We have people there ready to answer any questions that you would like to have answered, and just to have an engagement about our project and what we're doing to create that business partnership and how we're working with our community in Fort Nelson First Nation and the local municipality. So I invite you to use that venue.
That is a great answer, and my hats are always off to chiefs that have to become experts in every area, resource, yes. every ministry the government has, right? You are now the leading expert in that section. So, and thank you for the shout out too, is to visit the virtual exhibitor booths. I know that Peak Renewables is there and they've got staff on hand. So we're getting close to wrapping up, but there's another one here that says, thank you very much for your report. It was very interesting. Is your band, or shall I say your First Nations, 100% owners of your thermal energy plant? And how did your nation get into this? And the reason the question is being asked is that I come from an area that has a lava bed in our front yard. And who do you recommend talking to about getting into this? So it's a pretty specific question.
Okay, so the Fort Nelson First Nation has had oil and gas activity within our territory for the past 50, 60 years. And with that, there's been extensive studies put on regarding this gas play. And it was always very curious of our members to see that when the gas came out of the ground, that the pipeline was very hot, so the snow would be melted around it. So over decades, we've been very curious about what that possibility could be. And so there has been a lot of scientific data that had led us to start exploring this avenue. And so because we only have a little bit of time, I do welcome you to send me an email, and I could also put you in touch with our technical team so that maybe we can help you with exploring your project and being successful with that too.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that offer that you've put out. Well, we are running short on time now this morning, so I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Forum Advisory Committee. On behalf of all the virtual viewers here today, we really appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness you put into your presentation and your willingness to connect after the event. I know I'm looking forward to the First Nations Major Projects Coalition Conference, not to be missed. So, thank you, and I invite everyone to take a look at that. There's more information through the Whova app on that as well. And yes, can't say thank you enough.
Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me to be a keynote at the speaker. It was such an honor. And I can tell you that me and my council are working really hard to ensure that we're successful in the projects going forward. It's so important towards our self-determination. And I just, yeah, big shout out to everyone that joined in at the conference. Mussy. Hi, hi.
Oh, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tim Mcmillan, President and CEO of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. It's a pleasure to be part of the 2021 BC Natural Resources Forum and a privilege to be able to offer thanks to Chief Gale for her powerful keynote and her advocacy in support of our country's natural gas and oil industry. Canada's natural gas and oil industry strive to make meaningful contributions to Indigenous economic prosperity and self-determination. As one of the country's largest employers of Indigenous people, our industry champions the importance of Indigenous reconciliation in Canada and considers responsible resource development to be linked to broader reconciliation processes. It's been a challenging period in Canada and for the resource sector. Yet, we see signs of recovery and hope on the horizon. This year, we expect oil and gas to help kick off this recovery with an increase of $3.36 billion of investment. For British Columbia, this means an increase of 29% in oil and gas investment in 2021. The success of our natural resource sector is essential to the recovery of jobs and prosperity in Canada in the months and years to come. Investing in and publicly supporting our natural resources is how we will create the best jobs and opportunities for growth from Newfoundland to British Columbia. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Chief Gale, for that wonderful presentation. We will certainly be saving the dates for the 4th annual First Nations Major Projects Coalition Industry Engagement event, March 18th and 19th. That brings us to our first coffee break of the day from 11 to 11:30 a.m. Don't forget to check out our virtual exhibitors. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and we'll see you back online at 11:30 for the next session, Today, Tomorrow, Together, Inclusion of Women in the Resource Sector.